thanks so much, Alwyn and Mairead, and obviously as well to Lisa for organising all of this. So when Steph approached me to join the panel and she told me the topic, I was just so delighted because it's such an important topic, and especially for women. I just feel a little bit of knowledge goes a long way. So I guess my key thing today is know your numbers. And my approach is always to treat my personal finances as a business and also to treat my business as a business. And I regularly sit down with my husband and we have a little board meeting and we go through our finances. And I think the most recent one is the most relevant one, when we sat down in April and we had a look at what was happening in the world and what could happen to us and how do we be fixed. Would he get made redundant? Would he get stood down? Would I lose clients? Where were we at? So we wanted to establish how much we had in the tank, what could come in terms of redundancy, what would it be worth to us, and where would it get us to? So we sat down, we looked at things, and the first thing we looked at was our mortgage, because that's our biggest outgoing. And we looked at our interest rate, and we hadn't looked at that in a while, and who does? And that's a bit of balance sheet hygiene. So that was one of the action items, and we went off and we spoke to the broker, got a best rate. He said we were one of the first people to approach him to look to change rates. And we weren't the last, because as the process went on, he was getting more and more requests because everyone was looking at this and going, this needs to be looked at. And then we also looked at our expenses and we said, what can we cut? Now, obviously, we're in lockdown, so there wasn't much to cut, but we wanted to be clear on what we had and what could we further cut if things got really, really dire. So the idea behind this is that we're able to do this because we knew our numbers, we're able to make plans, and we had different scenarios. So we kind of felt that we had a plan to go forward with. So we thought that was kind of okay. So I guess reports that I use all the time are simply ways of categorizing money in and money out. And my aim tonight is to kind of cast some light on that and to maybe help you look at things through a different lens. So Mairead, can we just go to slide number 2, I think it is, we'll just frame up what we're going to look at. So we'll go to this is it. So whether we are working professionally or we're running our own business, we can treat them both the same, as I said. So we all have money coming in and going out, right? And that's effectively our profit and loss statement, right? We all have assets and liabilities. Now, assets are going to be things like our superannuation, which Steph's going to talk about, bank account, we could have a property, we could have a share portfolio. So they're all of our assets. On the other side of our balance sheet, we've got things like, liabilities, right? So we have credit card debt, possibly. We might have ATO debt. We might have a mortgage, right? So all of these things are our liabilities that go against those. So let's dive into these in a little bit more detail and we can take it from there. So can we go on to the next slide, please, Mairead? Great, thanks so much. So I've just done a little tiny graphic here to have a little look at the profit and loss. So you can see the revenue side. We've got a bit of salary, right, if we're professionals, or we have income coming in from our business. Other income streams might be from a rental property or dividends from a share portfolio. So that's the plus side. Now, what have we got on the going out side, right? We've got rent or mortgage. We've got the costs of making your product. That could be staff costs or it could be materials or manufacturing costs. And then we've got lots of operating costs. So could be your office expenses, your subscriptions, or what have you. And you're also going to have discretionary spend in there, right? Now, your discretionary spend could be the Uber Eats, right? We know there's a bit of that, or the shoe purchasing, or whatever else you have. But at the end of the day, if you've got more money coming in than going out, you're profitable. And sometimes, you know, with our salaries, we don't always get to that point by the end of the month, but that's kind of the idea. So I guess some of the key things that we can get from our P&L is there's some good metrics in there. And an interesting one, and quite a scary one, is how much of your pre-tax income do you spend on your mortgage if you're lucky enough to have one? And if it's over 30%, you're technically in mortgage stress, right? So that can be quite a sobering thought, but in context, you know, living in expensive places as we do, a lot of people will be up at that 30% mark, but it's just worth bearing in mind that is quite a high percentage, and the banks look on that as a risky kind of thing. So other things that we can get from our profit and loss would be our gross margin, which everyone hears about and people don't necessarily know about. And that is basically what's left over after you've sold something and you've paid for producing it. So that's your gross margin. It's as simple as that. There's nothing else to it. So some businesses, like tech businesses, might be 80%, which is really high. So manufacturing businesses might be 10%. So it's more important when you're trying to track yourself against the industry that you're working in. Another thing to look at would be to think about how much of my wages is a proportion of my revenue that's going out the door. So if that's about like 80%, for example, like that's pretty high, and there's not much left over to pay for anything else or to make a profit. And you can use these metrics to benchmark yourself against your competitors and things like that, and kind of figure out, can you do things in a smarter way? So I guess if you kind of get a chance to categorize your ins and your outs, you get much more of an idea about how you're operating, right? And you get an idea about what you could potentially change. And then this is going to make it easier for you to ultimately make a plan and then make changes to implement that plan. So that's the profit and loss. We'll just move on to the balance sheet. And we can see there, as I said earlier, what we have. So the great things on our balance sheet are our bank accounts. Hopefully we've got some money in there. People who owe us money, that's our receivables. And that's a really key thing for businesses. We've got our superannuation, which we don't really think about, but that's right there on our balance sheet. And if you're going for a mortgage, you're going to be asked for how much is in there. So that's a key asset for all of us. You might own your own car, you might have your own house, you might not own it outright, but you might have your house. So it's things like that that are your assets, right? Going against those is how we're paying for them, right? So the famous credit card debt is in there. We have, if we're running a business, we've got bills to be paid, right? And there are payables. Other payables we have is ATO debt. Now that could be GST that we've collected. It could be income tax, which applies to personal and business. It could be superannuation for your staff. And then we also have our mortgage, or possibly finance leases on the car that you have. So at the end of the day, if all your assets are larger than your liabilities, you can pay for everything that you owe. And that's basically all a balance sheet is, right? So what kind of things can we get out of our balance sheet? So number one, do you know how long it takes your customers to pay you? You know, you can find that out pretty quickly with your accounting software. Does it take them 45 days, but actually your terms are 14? What could you do to change that? Because you want the money in your bank account, not in theirs. What else we got there? Balance sheet hygiene. What about your bills on the other side? How long does it take you to pay your bills? Are you paying them in terms? Like, don't pay them immediately. If it's 30 days, pay them in 30 days. Don't pay the ATO early. Pay them when it's due. Just little things like that just puts you on top of your finances to go, no, actually, I'm in control of my cash. I can plan my cash flow and I can take it from there. And then, you know, another key thing that's kind of starting to get pretty technical is, what's your working capital? So your working capital, very simply, is adding your bank and your receivables together and taking away your payables and your ATO debt and your credit card debt. And if the pluses are bigger than the minuses, you've got working capital, which is what you use to fund your business. And banks look at this, particularly if they're giving you a loan, they look at this and go, oh, well, can you cover your short-term costs or your short-term debt? And hopefully, mostly you can. So they're kind of some of the crucial things that you can get out of the information that is available to us all, but we don't necessarily kind of think about it like that. So let's, if we may, Mairead, we'll move on to the next slide, where I just want to have a little think about goals and targets and then debt. So we can all have goals, and in a business, I'm going to frame that up as a budget. And we're going to set a budget and we're going to report against it and we're going to see where we're going. And it's great to set a plan, because if you set a plan, it gives you something to work towards, but also to report against plan, you get to go, well, why didn't that happen? Well, what blew out that month? Do I need to plan for, well, that bill came in that I didn't expect? Do I need to plan for that again? And you can adjust where you're going in the future. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to build up a bit of a forward view on that runway of where you're going. So if, for example, you set a target to save a deposit for a house, take the cash out at the beginning of the month, put it in the savings account, and just, you don't even see it. You don't even think about it. What you've got left is what you have left to spend. And that just starts to accumulate and build up in an absolutely great way. You know, do you want to grow your revenue by 20%? How can you do that? Does that need a marketing plan, which involves cost, but it could support the revenue in a great way. So you want to understand what that's going to look like. What changes could you make to your spending habits? If you start to look at things and go, oh my God, my discretionary spend is something like 25% of my income, and that's pretty high. What changes can you make to that? Is it no more internet shopping? Is it a local holiday, not an overseas holiday? Bad example, but you know what I mean. And then just having a review of what you've done in the past gives you a really clear idea of where you can go to and what you can change to make things slightly better. So I just want to close on debt because, you know, it's terrifying. We all have it in one form or another. But I think it's important that if you understand what kind of debt you have and what you can do with it, you can deal with it and you can get rid of it. So I think the important thing to know is that credit card debt is the most expensive debt out there, right? We're paying somewhere between 18 and 22% interest a year on our credit card debt. And I know we're going to touch on compound interest later on, but that's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger if you don't pay that down. There's cheaper forms of financing out there. So for example, your mortgage rates are at about 4% currently. So if you're in a position to extend your mortgage to pay off your credit card debt, that's a smart thing to do. Whilst it'll take you longer to pay off the mortgage, it's still cheaper. So there's little ways of thinking about things and looking at and going, well, actually, do I really need a finance lease for the car? How can I get rid of that? What's the better way of renegotiating that or dealing with that and getting rid of it? And then it's looking at how are you funding your lifestyle or your business? Are you funding it off the credit card? Or have you got a plan in place to go, no, I've got that cash coming in. I've got the GST put to one side to pay, and you know where everything's going. And it's just really understanding that. And I think my big thing, and I love the Barefoot Investor, and I'm a huge fan of it, is domino your debts. It's like just get rid of those debts, and then you've just got an absolutely clear runway of moving forward and achieving your goals. So I hope I haven't rushed too much, but that's it for me. Thanks so much.